Yeah, let's get going, Krisha. So thank you everyone for joining us today for our Clinic Hours session around how to successfully pivot your in-person event to digital. My name's Kaylin Neal, and I work on the channel marketing team in EMEA, and I'm joined by several of my colleagues, as you can see. We have Krisha, who's also on the EMEA channel marketing team, Austin, who does channel marketing for AMER and APAC, and Paul, who is the head of channel marketing, and we have a number of our channel specialists and channel managers here. Also on the call is Heather. She's our channel programs manager, and she's going to answer any of your DF related questions. Just a few things. This session is going to be recorded, and do feel free to type in any of your questions in the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen, and we'll be sure to get to those at the end. So creativity comes from constraint. I like this quote a lot. Since the outbreak of COVID-19, everyone, as you know, has to take a different approach to working and to customer and prospect outreach. Although this presents a lot of challenges, we want to assure you that digital events can provide just as much impact and value as in-person events. Creativity, problem solving, and willingness to experiment with new formats and promotional activities will take you very far in this scenario. Okay, I'm just gonna launch the second poll here. Hopefully that works. Yeah, so the channel marketing team recently put together a few pages which are now on the partner portal. And these pages serve as a guide if you're thinking, what the heck do I do now that my in-person event has been canceled? So we have a few tracks available. So if your event has been postponed or if your event has turned digital, you can find a lot of resources and tips, and we're gonna quickly go through what you can expect to find in those pages. Can everyone see the poll?
Still have the first poll running. The results of the first poll. So maybe close that one and then open the next window.
Okay. Oh, there we go. It should work now.
Not seeing the second poll. Hey, Kaylin, I'm not sure if you...
Yeah, I'm relaunching it.
I can see the second poll now. Two already shared.
Yeah.
Their answers.
Okay. Well, let's do a show of hands. There should be a raise hand function. If you have read the resource pages in the partner portal already, if you could raise your hands, that would be great. Awesome. Okay. Cool, thank you. So what you can expect to find on these pages in the partner portal, which I encourage you all to read, and we'll send the links in a follow-up email as well. You can expect to find some resources such as best practices on how to execute a webinar from our own events team, as well as from On24, Adobe, and Zoom. We include webinar hosting information and pricing, which you can see here, and a slew of content inspiration. It's important to acknowledge that running a webinar is different than running an event, so we include practical and creative tips to make sure your content is engaging for a digital audience. You can find guidance around DF and what Atlassian might be able to help fund. Since these are indeed some unusual times, there's room for some creativity on what Atlassian can fund. For example, paid social, hiring a copywriter for a blog series, getting an industry leader to present during your webinar, or working with an agency to make sure your webinar content is up to scratch. Third, we really encourage you to share some of your experiences in the partner portal. These pages are open for comment, and we want you to share best practices, brag about your creative marketing wins, or ask for guidance from other partners as you're navigating how to pivot from an in-person to a digital event. The channel marketing team will also be monitoring these pages closely. So if you have questions for our team that you think other partners might also benefit from, please do drop it in the comments. I believe we have some folks from Divinity here, and they very recently, I think within the past week, they pivoted one of their in-person events. It was part of their Jira tour to a digital event. So I think Kat is here. If you want to share just very briefly what you did, if it was a success, and some of the things you last minute had to change.
Yeah, so maybe a short story about what we did. Yes, as Caitlin says, it was the tour that the few events that we called the Jira tour. It was 5 events, each 1 week in a different city in Poland, only in person. So when it turns out during the 4th event that because of the COVID-19, we don't have as much people as we predicted to be, because from the 40 that was registered, only 10 comes. Then we decide last Wednesday evening that we need to make the event online, so digital from the in-person. So we had only 3 working days to change everything, to make any to do any event that will be worth to come, because when we predicted the last event in Gdańsk, we feel that it will be the best one and the biggest one. And when we called attendees, it turns out that we will be having 2, maybe 3 persons. So that was nothing to that will be mistake to go to Gdańsk and to organize anything. So it was the quite fast decision to make it online, and it was challenging for us because we have 3 presenters in different cities. We wasn't at the beginning ready to make the presentation from different places. Our tool allows us to have presenters only in one place. And the second day, we got the decision from our headquarters that we need to work only remotely. So the problems occurs next day, and we need to find the best tool, and it was successful. From the 55 registrations to the digital event, we have 42 attendees. We need to slightly change the agenda of the event because one of our colleagues who is not living in Wrocław, who should be a presenter, we changed to someone who will be on site. After that, it didn't matter because everyone did the presentation from their homes. But it was challenging and very stressful. After all, it was one of the best from the whole tour. So we believe that this is something that can work. Maybe one good tip: don't do as fast as we have, because sometimes we feel that we are working faster than we think, and this is something that isn't the best. If you have more than 3 working days than us, it's very good, a good idea. And in our in our case, people were very active. They asking questions during the presentation, and there was only also a space for a short networking for some people who wanted to talk to us and to others. So we feel that this was the best decision that we could make then.
Oh, can I just ask, so you said you had some networking at the end of the webinar. How was that?
Yeah.
How did you manage to do that?
Because it was in a tool, something like Zoom,
Okay.
we unmute everyone and they could ask questions. So they were sometimes speaking to each other, not to us. This was something that in our culture isn't the standard, because people are not talking to each other very openly, and this works. So we were happy with that.
Great, that's very impressive. I'm very impressed that you were able to turn it around in 3 working days. So yeah, thank you very much for sharing with us.
Hey, there was
Thank
one
you.
question about your webinar, to see if you were able to track the engagement from the participants in the webinar, or if you were only able just to see how many people logged on and joined the webinar.
No, we track everything. We track how much time they spent on the webinar. So 75% of people who logged in stay until the end. So this is something that we could measure.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah, I know Zoom has a lot of reporting, so you can see how people are engaging with your webinar as you use different functions. So glad that you took advantage of that. Let's see. Can you go to the next slide, Krisha? Cool. So also in these partner portal pages, you can expect to find some marketing plans. And again, as I mentioned earlier, we have 2 separate tracks depending on whether your event has been postponed or has turned digital. And the marketing plans are step-by-step guides, beginning from notifying your attendees immediately to creating promotional plans, reviewing your digital tools, and coming up with a follow-up strategy. So just to get a bit more granular with the marketing plans, we have some action points here. So the first is coming up with a blog series. So writing a blog series to promote your webinar. You can also apply for DF funding to hire an agency or copywriter to create this content. A few ideas include 3 reasons to join your webinar, how your solutions make it easier to work remotely, or a Q&A with one of your speakers. Next is an email campaign. So you can send out weekly emails to remind your customers of your webinar, but include different calls to action, such as download a free ebook, read your blog series, follow you on social media, or of course, register for your webinar. And this is also a great time to assess your CRM tool and make sure you have proper list segmentation. Then running social media competitions. This will not only help you promote your webinar, but gain followers and learn more about your customers as they engage with you. You can do things like requiring people to write a comment, answering a specific question, or sharing your post to their page in order to be eligible to win some sort of prize. And lastly, paid social media. You can apply for DF funding to run some extra social media advertising, or to work with an agency to manage your social advertising campaign. This is a really good opportunity to A/B test certain messaging, targeting, and creative, and run them for a few weeks longer than you normally would. I'm running another poll, but I don't know if it's going to work. Again, ooh,
I'm seeing the poll.
Thank you.
It looks like it's working, yeah.
Okay, thanks guys. Yeah, so I'm just asking if our attendees already have a webinar provider. And again, if you don't, I recommend going to the pages on the partner portal, because we have a big list of webinar providers, pros, cons, pricing, all that kind of stuff. I'll just leave that open and we can carry on. So just getting down a bit more granular now into some of the content tips. Again, it goes more into detail in the partner portal pages. But the first thing we recommend is a catchy title. A catchy title can boost webinar registration by 43%. Use some of the following words can help, such as how to, beginner's guide, 101, masterclass, and workshop. In your description, be super clear about who your target audience is, a desired outcome, and 3 valuable takeaways. Then next is webinar functionality. Use your screen sharing to demo products as much as possible. Webinars are obviously a very visual medium, so take advantage of that. We suggest limiting 1 idea per slide and make sure that your visuals are pretty and good quality. And in this case, working with an agency is totally fine to help make sure that your content is of good quality. And lastly, be sure to use Q&A and the polling functionality to keep attendees engaged. Lastly, thirdly, encourage conversation. Make sure you account for some extra time for participants to ask questions. You can also flip this and ask your attendees a question, which can then spark a conversation. Many webinar providers also have the option to organize breakout rooms, so see if that's an option for you. And like Kat said from Divinity, our Polish partner, have a networking option at the end, like add an extra 20 minutes for people to just converse amongst themselves. That's a really great idea. And then our last tip is having a creative edge. So think of something creative to make the webinar seem personal, fun, and memorable. You can start with an icebreaker, for example, where participants introduce themselves, what industry they're working in, and what their favorite work from home tip is. We'll also be considering funding creative initiatives with DF. So for example, sending attendees an Uber Eats voucher so you guys can all eat lunch together. I think that's a pretty fun idea. Let's see, now it's Q&A time. So please use the Q&A function. If you've had any questions in the chat, I'll try and go through, but if you could also put it in the Q&A just so I can go through them, that would be really helpful. And as I mentioned, the channel marketing team is on the call, as well as some channel managers from EMEA and AMER, and Heather, who manages the development fund program. So she is available to answer any of your DF related questions.
Yeah, thanks, Kaylin. We've already had, this is Heather, by the way. We've had a question both the chat and in the Q&A from Lo, but I believe, you know, other partners might have the same question, and it regards cancellation fees. And so just to go ahead and cover that, unfortunately right now with development funds, we're not able to cover cancellation fees that are on top of the activity. So, so that's where we are with cancellation fees, you know, but we do want to be as creative as we can about helping you continue and pivot on any of these activities in any way we can.
Sorry, I'm having a question come in, a few questions. I'm going to start with this one. For the example that we just gave, Heather, around the Uber Eats vouchers for a creative way to run a webinar, would that also be funded only 50% for DF, or are we open to changing that?
We do typically ask that, like all development fund programs, you know, we would like to share the costs with you, as opposed to paying 100% of the costs. So by being more creative, being more quick and flexible in this program, we're hoping that that can help you all. But we still would like to split the costs as much as possible with you guys. But, you know, speak with your individual channel manager and talk about maybe what kind of budgeting they have available, and we can work on a case-by-case basis. But as we say, we like to have everybody to have a little bit of skin in the game.
Great. Yeah, thanks. Okay. I have a question here. I'm going to read it out loud. For partners that have had to postpone events, is there any flexibility for invoicing Atlassian under an open PO? So for example, 50% now, 50% for when we deliver at a later date to cover up front costs they've had for the event production.
I think, unfortunately, I don't think we're able to do that just because of financial accounting rules and just how it works in the back end. We typically we don't really pay for anything up front, and that's like a financial rule thing as well that I don't think that we're allowed a lot of creative flexibility on in this case. I understand where you're coming from with this, but it would have to be kind of a case-by-case basis, and we'd have to kind of think about how you might deal with this if we have to change your request or something like that. But I think basically you just need to wait until you have the activity and submit your claim as soon as possible, and we'll process those claims as quickly as they come in so that you receive your payment very quickly.
So you don't think that will change due to the COVID-19 circumstances?
At this point, I don't know that it will, just because of just how financial accounting practices are working. I can take note of this, and you know, if we have any other updates along those lines, I can certainly find a way to share it with you all. But right now, that's my understanding from a financial perspective.
Yeah, so we have one of the partner portal pages that I keep referring to is a DF frequently asked questions page. So we'll maybe put some of these questions onto that page so people can stay up to date. And if you have any updates, maybe using that page to do that as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Heather, as a channel manager, speaking here, is it possible if there was maybe promotional things they did up front? It's like having advertisement and so on. This could still be beneficial to the business, and maybe they have links behind it. Could they alter the request then and make something different out of it, and maybe shrink the amount and create a new request? I'm just trying to be creative here.
Let's see here. So if they have, let me be sure to understand. If they have a question, if they have an activity and they need to change that activity, are they allowed to change it? That's part of the question.
It was referring to Nigel's question. They did already do some stuff upfront regarding the event, which usually or quite often includes promotional activities and maybe creating content and so on, which could still be used already in a different manner. So the question is if this could be transferred into another, not maybe an event type, maybe something like advertisement and lowering their request, if this could help.
Okay, so I think I can see two ways to answer that. Yes, they can change the content, they can pivot that content, they can reuse that content. If you need to just edit the development fund request itself, you can edit the description, the type of information that's in there. I think you can still edit that. If you want to change the amount of the request, what you can, the way it usually works, if I'm understanding you correctly, is let's say you have a $10,000 event activity, and they said, we want to get $5,000 like right now for all the content and promotion that you're speaking of. Perhaps you could say, create the invoice, create the proof of performance, show, as a screenshot of your content or something, your normal kind of just claim documents. Submit a claim, say this is for not 10,000, but it's for 5,000. Go ahead and get that payment processed. and then you end up with extra money in your budgets, Aileen. But then and you can create another ticket for the balance that you might need for later on, if that makes sense.
Yeah, we can take it offline, so maybe we can help Nigel.
Okay.
Thank you, Heather.
I have another question for you, Heather. Is purchasing of lead lists for promoting webinars eligible for DF?
Yes.
Great.
Heather, I have one that we've commonly been asked is Atlassian going to be making any exceptions to the typical end of fiscal year as far as being able to move money from the Atlassian Q4 into Q1?
Again, according to the finance team, unfortunately, no. Certain financial rules are just in place that I can't roll money from this fiscal year to the next.
Thank you.
Budgets will be coming. There will be money. There will be funding in the next fiscal year in Q1, starting in July. The program will still be here. You'll still be able to get development funds, and you can still talk to your channel managers and this team about those activities in advance of those, and we will get those POs created to you on day one.
And I think in that case, the recommendation from channel marketing, as I see it, is if you've moved an event till, the end of June 2020, the end of Atlassian's fiscal year, we'd really, really encourage you to think about going digital, just because we can't predict what's going to happen with this virus. So just really starting to think about making your event digital.
Yeah, because unfortunately, aren't we all glad we're not in finance right now? But if you do have an event and you have it for the very last day of June, the very last day of our Atlassian fiscal year, the regulations are such that they give us about 30 days after that. Your typical, they get kind of stringent on the claim deadline. And you have until July 30th or 31st to submit that claim so that it can be paid. And if you continue that, if it goes after that, then finance has the option to declining that payment. So that's one of the one of those things to keep in mind in terms of pushing things to the very last day, and then maybe things not happening where we're constrained by some just financial rules. And so, like Kaylin said, we'd really encourage you to try to be creative about how we deliver that content.
We don't have questions, but as more come in, I'm going to launch the last poll around what partners struggle with the most when putting on a webinar. And this will help the channel marketing team. Hopefully this is working. It will help us assess what kind of support we can give to our partners. I don't know if people can see the poll.
If not, Kaylin, maybe we can have an email that they can send it to.
Okay, yep. Okay, we have another question. Do you have a tool proposal that is also GDPR compliant? I imagine you mean a webinar hosting tool, is that correct? Yeah, so a webinar tool that is GDPR compliant.
So most of these tools that we actually recommended on the page that we prepared for solution partners, all of this has been reviewed. Atlassian is using ON24. A lot of us are using Zoom as well. A lot of solution partners are using Zoom as well, and all of these are GDPR compliant.
Yeah, this person is saying that Zoom is not. I'm not sure if you could give us a source or something around that, just so we can look into that. But Atlassian is very, very conscious of the GDPR regulations.
Yeah, and we have a Zoom consultant that we can actually ask this question, and maybe we can also add a link around GDPR on this page. So we can add that as a column as well.
Cool. Yes, great. Okay.
Oh, Kaylin, the poll just popped up for the struggles question.
Woohoo! I'm sure I did something different. I just don't know what it was.
Don't you love when that happens, when it finally works and you don't know what it is that made it work? Those are the best.
Oh, and if there's anything that you struggle with that's not in this poll, feel free to add that in the comment section, and then we'll just collect all of those feedback as well.
And that's the comment section on the page you're sharing right now?
Yes. So it's all the way to the bottom, right here.
And someone has also said that finding new audiences to promote the webinar to is also a big struggle. So I'll be sure to note that down. I'm sure that person is not alone.
You know, that actually reminds me of something. I know that can be a struggle, specifically finding that right audience. And I just wanted to say that when it comes to any of these activities and your target audiences, if you're buying certain lists, if you had an original plan that targeted whatever audience, one or two audiences, whatever, maybe this is a time to ask for some funding to add another third audience, another type of audience, or just increase the audience size. You can call it, like a test to see if this audience responds to your content any differently than the other one does. So there's an opportunity there to use the funding to purchase the list, or increase your current list size, or do some sort of testing, or buy some additional Google keywords, for example, in your advertising, if you were going to do that, to kind of branch out into your audience.
One new question that just came in was around, will Atlassian be able to help partners promote their webinars? And yes, just like Atlassian is able to help promote your live events on the Atlassian website via the Atlassian partner events page, and also our product and solution pages, we're able to promote your live webinars there, as well as on our social media channels. So to do that, you can just get in touch with your channel specialist, which would be myself, Kaylin, or Kristia, or you can raise a ticket in the partner portal and we'll get that added right away.
And those are often geo-targeted as well. So you know that when they're posting about the event on social media, that it is going to the audience that you want to capture. And Aileen says, you can always ask channel managers to share your events on LinkedIn and so on. That's a great one. Thanks, Aileen. Okay, so we have another question. I think this is for the channel marketing team. Will you only promote webinars that are in line with Atlassian core messages? Or, for example, if we have something that is app-centric?
So, Caitlin, historically, yes, we've only been promoting webinars that are focused on Atlassian, and we haven't been able to help partners that are really focused on marketplace apps.
Here's a question. So let's see. When talking about buying lists for specific audiences, how many contacts is normal to purchase for one audience?
That's a good question. I don't think there's a normal, and you guys are more in the trenches on this lately than I am, but this is Heather again. But I don't think there's a specific answer to that. I think that if you were to search, what your target demographic looks like, the numbers would be all over the place. So it's whatever you think your audience size is, basically.
Yeah,
Not a great answer, but I think it can be anything.
In my experience with this, typically these lists have to be pretty large in order to see results from them, because they're definitely much more difficult to work than a nurtured list. So oftentimes, I'd say the average size of a list purchase that I come across is usually around 5,000 people.
That's a good point too, about a nurtured list versus a new list. You have the relationship with the nurtured list. These people don't know you, so you do need to spread the message farther, and consider, if you just have a 1 or 2% kind of conversion rate or click rate on these things, how big your audience has to be to get 10, 50, 100 responses.
Okay, and then are there reputable vendors that you'd recommend buying lists from? Krisha or Austin, do you have any thoughts on that one?
Yeah, we can probably research on this. We don't have a list of vendors at the moment, but our email team can probably give us a little bit more insight as to who they're actually engaging in terms of buying lists.
That's a good point. There's lots of list vendors out there.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe that's something to follow up with your channel marketing specialist and channel manager as well.
Yeah, and we'll definitely add that in the tips and tricks page, and the best practice pages as well.
All right. If there are any more questions, please do use the Q&A function. Otherwise, if channel managers have questions, or Heather, if you have any last things to say. Otherwise, this has been great.
Again, thank you guys for putting this on. This is you've done a great job putting this together quickly and making this Q&A available to everyone. And so thanks for that. I guess from a development fund perspective, don't worry, it's all going to be okay. I know it's not as easy. It's not as easy as said than. It's easier said than done to just pivot and do these things. But we still do have the funding available to you. So if you want to try to get some pieces together quickly, some advertising, some content, some whatever, go ahead and put those requests in, and we can get those kind of turned around with your channel manager and this team to kind of get those approved and moved along. We'll be here for you in the next few months. I think we're going to be okay. And, we'll try to be as creative as we can. Our only constraints are some financial rules that I can't affect. Just while I'm at it, as a reminder, we'll continue to always be as flexible as possible. I know everybody's hurried and rushed about this. When you do go back and you want to make a claim against your request, all I'll just remind you about is just put in, make sure you have the main components of a claim so that you get that payment quicker. There should usually be a list of leads that you get from any of these activities. We prefer that they are still domain generating, as opposed to just kind of awareness and branding. We do want to help drive business, so domains. And the invoice for this activity so that we can pay you. And you can, if you don't know how to do that, all of that is on the Development Fund's user guide, how to create an invoice, what we need on it. And then whatever kind of proof of performance, any kind of visual, a screenshot, something just to say, hey, I've done this thing that shows kind of, your name, our name, whatever. That'll process it really quickly. But now if you don't have that and you're like, hey, these are just different circumstances, let's make an exception. We'll work with you. But just as a reminder, those are some of the little basic things we still do have to kind of work around to get the funding because of financial auditing in the background to make sure we're doing what we say we're paying for. So I appreciate everyone's understanding in that regard as well in advance.
Yeah, and I also wanted to point out that if you are wondering where you can find those general FAQs around program operations for DF, there's quick links in our COVID-19 Development Fund's FAQ page, so you can find those in here.
We have one last question, also for the channel marketing team, I think. Do you know some tools to let people RSVP in an easy way for online events? I think that your webinar provider will be a good one to start with. I know, like Zoom, for example, once you send out the invitation, it goes straight into people's calendars, and you can see, right away who said yes, who said no.
Yeah, On24 has the same functionality as well.
Sorry, who does?
On24,
Okay.
they also service that.
Yeah.
So.
And of course, it's easy because then it links directly to the online event, and like sometimes there are options to send reminder emails directly from the webinar hosting platform, so all of that built in makes it quite easy.
Yeah, and also don't forget that some partners are actually using agencies to organize their digital events, so the agencies can also take care of all of that logistic stuff for you.
And to add to that just a little bit, I have seen some examples where people have chosen to use like Eventbrite as the webinar registration tool, but I would recommend avoiding that because that would mean you then need to manually enter in those people to become participants in the webinar. And to add to what you said, Kaylin, yeah, certainly by managing it through the webinar platform is going to streamline the process of making sure everyone gets like an immediate confirmation email and also make those reminders a lot easier.
Okay. I think if there are no more questions, just a few things. Please do visit our partner portal pages. Say that 3 times fast. And then we would really, really love for you to share. I think we all want to know that we're not alone in this and we're here to support you. And this partner ecosystem is really amazing. So hopefully we're willing to, give each other some advice, tips, and share some awesome wins with each other.
Yeah, you make a good point, Kaylin. Maybe on this page, or I don't know if you guys, while I'm out, want to create something else, but maybe come back here and say, hey guys, I just learned this. The question that was asked about the email vendors. Hey, I just had a great experience with this vendor. Hey, I just learned this about RSVP. Whatever. Maybe we can do like a shared little community right here, come back to this or just say, hey, I need help. Maybe other people can pitch in too. It goes both ways.
Yeah, absolutely. And then obviously, like, your channel managers and your channel marketing specialists are here for you. So please feel free to get in touch with us.
Sure.
Okay.
We're going to get through this, everybody.
Yeah. Thank you all for joining.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.